All right, tonight we have a collection of assorted topics. A lot of weird stuff tonight. I don't know if I understand this Gemara, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain it. There really isn't a topical grouping. It's the teachings of Rabbi Eliezer. And because we kind of focused on Rabbi Eliezer in the previous Gemara, so the Gemara now continues to collect a bunch of different teachings that Rabbi Eliezer shared in the same place before we return to the subject of resurrection. And we'll be back next week. But in the meantime, the assorted topics begin with night activities. How should you spend your evenings? Okay, here's Rabbi Eliezer's advice. Page 92, side A. After telling you in great detail who not to feel bad for and not to show pity on, now Rabbi Eliezer tells you how to spend your nights. V'omar Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer said, Kol bayit she'ein divrei Torah nishma'im bo, any home where words of Torah are not heard balayla at night, eish ochlato, fire will consume it. Eish ochlato, it's pretty serious stuff. How do we know that? How did Rabbi Eliezer know that a house where Torah won't be heard will be consumed by fire? He says, what do you mean? It says it right there in the scripture. Shenemar, and here Rabbi Eliezer is quoting a verse from the book of Job. In the 20th chapter it says, well, it doesn't say this exactly, but it's expounded. It says, the pasuk reads as follows, Kol choshech tomun litzfunov, which he translates as any darkness where things are hidden, or where things are hidden away in the darkness, to ochleu eish lo nupach, a fire that requires no bellows will consume. So what does this mean? So what it seems to mean is, kol choshech, choshech is darkness. When is it dark? Huh? There's no audio? We have to start this all over again? Where was the no audio?
That's better.
Now we have audio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we'll start all over again.
Sorry, it wasn't working.
Okay, so station identification, we're Masechet Sanhedrin, page 92, side A. Assorted topics. All of these are teachings of Rabbi Elazar. And these teachings of Rabbi Elazar do not necessarily share a common theme. They're just different themes. The commonality amongst them is their teacher. In the previous Gemara, Rabbi Elazar talked about compassion, who is undeserving of compassion, for whom we should show no pity. Yep, believe it or not. Now, Rabbi Elazar tells us how nights should be spent. V'omar Rabbi Elazar said, Kol bayit she'ein divrei Torah nishma'im bo balayla, any place where words of Torah are not heard at night, eish ochalto, so then fire consumes it. How do we know this? Shenemar, because it says in the book of Job, chapter 20, verse 26, Kol choshech, that whenever we have a situation of darkness, and of course night is darkness, tomun litzifunov, so when there's darkness and there's no Torah, in an overt way, Torah is kind of squirreled or hidden away, so then in that case, tochleo eish lenupach, then fire, which requires no bellows, does not require any burning, that fire will consume or cause conflagration. So what does this mean? How did Rabbi Eliezer get there exactly? Let's take a look in Rashi. Rashi says that the pasuk kol choshech tomun litzfunav means kol laila, every night, tzafun v'nechbei mimatzpune haTorah, any night in which things are hidden from the mysteries of Torah, which means she'ein divrei Torah nishmoyim ba'ota bayit. If it's a house from which Torah is hidden, then tochleo eish lo nupach, What is a fire that requires no bellows? Says Rashi, Ze ishol shegehinnom. This refers to the fires of hell. She'ein tzarech nifuach. This is not physical fire, but rather this is fire which requires no oxygen, if you will. It doesn't have to be blown upon in order for it to have or be causing conflagration. So this unnatural or paranormal fire is going to consume that home. Now, I just want to finish this piece of Gemara, then I try to explain it. So the Gemara finishes off by saying, Yera sorid ba'aholi, that this is to the person who is bad to a remnant in his tent. The Gemara is going to tell us that the remnant, or the survivor here, is referring to a Torah scholar. Ein sorid, there is no survivor in the scriptural parlance, ela Talmud Chacham, only a Torah scholar. Shenemar, like it says in the book of Yoel, in the 3rd chapter, where it speaks about the terrible wars of Gog and Magog, which are the battles right before the conflict before Mashiach will come. And it says over there, Uvasridim asher Hashem kaira, there will be the remnants that God calls. So the remnants that God calls, the Gemara expounds, is a euphemism or refers to Talmidei Chachamim. Rashi says, Yera sarid be'aholei, mi shera be'einav. Somebody for whom it's literally bad in his eyes, or he doesn't appreciate that there should be sarid be'aholei, that there should be Torah scholarship in his home. So that's the case, so that we have eish echlatu, or echaltu. Now, of course, what in heaven does this mean? There are lots of homes where there's no Torah being studied, not by day, not by night. The homes aren't on fire. What is the Gemara saying? Like, what is it saying? Trying to threaten everybody into learning Torah? Or your house is going to burn down? Like, it's a very ineffective strategy to make threats like this that aren't fulfilled.
Maybe they're insurance salesmen, and it's good for.
Maybe they're insurance salesmen. I see now. Okay, good. That's a very effective way. Very effective way to sell insurance. So you better buy insurance if such and such would happen, and then it doesn't happen. And so why should I buy insurance?
For good deals, contact Rabbi.
What's going on here? What is the Gemara trying to tell us? So first of all, I think the first thing that has to be pointed out here is that the business of Torah not being heard at night is not specific. It's not a question of night. What's the difference during the day or it's at night? So the Maharsha says that during the day, people might be busy. People have a gainful employment. They're busy. They say, how come you're not studying Torah during the day? The guys, I'm working to make a living. Is that a sin? I'm doing whatever I have to do. But at night, they say, so what'd you do at your night? He said, well, at night I had to watch The Simpsons. And then there was Monday Night Football. And Tuesday night there was hockey. Rabbi, please, get real. Like there's things to do. That's exactly what the Gemara is talking about, says the Maharsha. The point of the Maharsha is this. According to the Maharsha, the point of the Gemara is, we will be judged not by the things we have to do. We have to do. The people have to make a living. That's not what we're judged by. You'll be judged by your recreation time. What's your hobby? What do you reach for when you aren't forced to do things that are necessary to make a living? This is the question. So if a person is to say, I don't have much time for spiritual pursuit, maybe he doesn't. Okay? That possibility certainly exists, and it's a mitzvah to make a living. And to rely on other people that they should have to make a living for you is not, as a rule, the Torah approach. So the rule of Torah approach is roll up your sleeves, make it happen. Okay. So you have to make it happen. But when it comes to recreation, so the question is, what lights our fire? What is our point of interest? Where do we gravitate towards when we aren't busy, when we aren't doing something? And the Torah expects us to be studying Torah. That's what God says. That is the length of your days. This is the matter that the life of a Yid is supposed to be woven from. And where do we see that? That you'll see at night. Night becomes ultimately a euphemism for when you have time on your hands. So people would say, I'm going on vacation. Are you going on vacation for shoyshla in Torah? Then you actually have time. Or, I'm tired. I worked all day. Okay, so find a part of Torah that you're able to learn. The point is, life should be meaningful. We live in a day and age where people need night activities. They need recreation. They have to be entertained at all times, either with a screen in front of them, a large screen, a small screen. Today you're holding it in your hand. They have to be entertained. And as long as they're entertained, they're happy. And the moment they're not entertained, they're bored. But what does it mean boredness for a Yid? What do you mean you're bored? You finished the whole Gemara already? You finished the whole Tanakh already? There's so much to learn. There's so much knowledge to be acquired. A Yid is supposed to devote his life to the acquisition of Torah knowledge. That's what we should be doing with our time. And if that doesn't happen, so then it says, Eish Achalta means the fires of hell consume him. The notion of hell from a Jewish perspective is not that God is vindictive and he strikes back at the people and says, you do what I want or I'll get back at you. That whole notion is an un-Jewish notion. It doesn't say it anywhere in our Torah. What we do have in oral tradition in our Torah is that when a neshama comes down to spend time here in a bodily reality, in a terrestrial frame, that it's supposed to utilize this opportunity well. And to utilize the opportunity well, one has to live meaningfully, one has to live purposefully, one has to be mission-driven. So either you're doing mitzvot, you're utilizing the opportunities that at your fingertips, or with the time that you have, you're studying Torah. When a Jew studies Torah, then they're connecting with Hashem. It's like having a...
What does it mean, kol bayis? Every house, why doesn't it every person?
So this is the Mefarshim talk about this, right? Because where does it become noticeable? They say during the day there's so much noise, you didn't notice that the person wasn't studying Torah. But at night it's quiet. And you could hear if the person would be studying Torah, it will be noticeable. In other words, the way the Mefarshim understand it, it's not literally the house will be consumed with fire. The house is a euphemism. In general, we call the marital home or building a family is called Bayit Neman B'Yisrael. It's called building a home. The concept of house, sometimes refers to a spouse, a wife. The concept of house is not about timber. It's not about bricks and mortar. So a bayis means a family unit. Bayit could mean an area, an environment, an atmosphere. But if you're in an atmosphere where Torah is not being heard, it doesn't mean that you have to study Torah at home and you can't study Torah in the Beis Medrash. Like if somebody goes to the house of study and his house is quiet, the lights are off because he's in the Beit Medrash studying Torah, is the house going to get burned? Self-understood not. Well, what did he do wrong? On the contrary, he went to a place where everybody's studying Torah together. That's the ideal way to study Torah. So really this is Rabbi Elazar here is speaking in euphemism. He's speaking in frames of speech. In the frame of speech, he's conveying to us what life's about for a Yid. And when you don't think like this, when you don't look at life this way, it sounds very strange. When you grew up in the typical Canadian milieu, where life is about the Simpsons and the weekend, and that's what life's about, and you hear things that it was kind of shocking thing. What is the Talmud talking about? What's wrong? What was Rabbi Elazar smoking? He must have lived in Ontario. I mean, this is unbelievable. What is he saying over here? You're not allowed to kick back and enjoy and chill out at night? No, you're not really supposed to. You have free time. That time is supposed to be dedicated to studying Torah, and that's invariably how it used to be. Once upon a time, that's what people did. They didn't have as many distractions. In today's day and age, we have more opportunity, so Hashem makes sure we also have more distractions. And it goes both ways. Of course, you could use the same iPhone to study Torah. You don't have to use it to watch Narishkeit to play Candy Crush. You could actually do something meaningful on the same iPhone today because there's as much Torah as there is anything else out there. The point being, we will be judged not for the time in which we're gainfully employed or the time in which we're busy. We'll be judged by our time of our recreation. How'd you spend your holiday? That's the question. How'd you spend the time off? How'd you spend your evenings? This is the question they will ask us someday, and it is for this that the concept of Gehenna, which essentially means a cleansing. In order for a neshama to be able to go on to the next level, it has to be cleansed. Cleansed of the toxins that it absorbed during the time it spent here on planet Earth, not doing what Hashem asked it to do. So there are no parv moments in life, times in life which don't count. Every moment of life is meaningful, and we have to make it meaningful. And if we don't make it meaningful, well, then it's the opposite of meaningful, and the opposite of holy. And that's best seen baleilos, when the darkness, when nothing else is going on. Anyway, that's the best I can give you for this Gemara. I warned you at the outset, I do not claim to understand this Gemara perfectly. I am wholly imperfect, and I have a very limited mind, but I think that this is what the Gemara is trying to tell us. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to the next teaching of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, Anybody who does not share of his affluence and wealth with scholars of Torah. That person will never see a sign of blessing. How does he get there? Well, it's easy to understand how we go from one subject to the next, because here, once again, we're going to be quoting the same verse in the book of Job, in chapter 20, and it's just a little bit off, but here, once again, the same idea which was talked about from the book of Yoel, that we have this idea of Ein Sorid La'ochloi, he has no remnant to eat, Al Kain Lo Yochil Toiv, therefore, he will not enjoy success or goodness, success and goodness. The Ein Sorid, there's no remnant. Ella Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chachamim are considered the remnants, as it says in the book of Yoel, just mentioned a moment ago, at the end of the third chapter, which speaks about the wars, a short period of great conflict and conflagration in the world before the coming of Mashiach, which is called Gog and Magog. And it says there, Uvasridim asher Hashem koira, the remnants that Hashem calls. It is very interesting that the Rambam, in the beginning of his Mishnah Torah, when he speaks about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's big decision to commit the oral Torah to writing, he says that, he talks about Talmidei Chacham as remnants. He says there was remnants. And because it was only Asridim Asher Yikru, it was a remnants of people studying Torah, because of this, he says, that's why it became necessary for Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to write the oral Torah down as he did, and so on and so forth. I'm just saying he refers to the concept of Talmidei Chachamim also as remnants. Okay, what's the Gemara talking about over here? What does this mean when we say, Kol mi she'eini mahane? Anybody who doesn't, so to speak, share of his wealth with others. Specifically not with others, but specifically Talmidei Chachamim. All right, so here we have even less to go on. Rashi doesn't even say anything. All we get is if you look in Rashi and you look in the Ralbag in their commentary in Eov, you'll find the word Yochel comes to the word like Lasses Choil, which means success. So what does this mean? So here's what I think it means. And I don't know. I'm telling you right now. I don't know. I don't understand this Gemara. Okay, but I think it was what it's saying to us. Nothing in this world is empty. Nothing in this world is meaningless. Everything has a purpose. So if a person has affluence, there's a purpose for that affluence. Most would tend to think of affluence as, well, that's my money. What's the purpose? What's the purpose? I'm going to live. I'll have fun. I'll go to Casino Ram. I'll burn my money. It's my money. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to enjoy life. They think of having money as a key or a segue to enjoying life, to having fun, which, by the way, doesn't really make people happy, because rich people are not any happier than poor people per capita, and they don't even necessarily enjoy life even more. They just have different kinds of pleasures and the same frustrations. The highs and lows, the rushes of serotonin and the lack thereof are probably really no different for people who are rich or poor. That's the funny thing. The poor people think, like, if only I was a rich man, Tevye famously singing, if only I was a rich man, and the rich people are trying to understand why the poor people are so happy. How come they look so happy, to poor people? I have all this money, I'm not happy. Well, really, these things don't buy us happiness. Plenty and affluence doesn't buy us happiness. We are probably the wealthiest people per capita that has ever walked the face of the earth. We have more affluence and more material bounty than any other civilization since the beginning of time. We have just about every amenity. We just have every comfort under the sun except happiness. We are less happy than people have been since they started keeping records. We have higher rates of suicide now than since records have started being kept. And probably and possibly the highest ever in human history. Why are people so unhappy? And the answer is because we have lots of stuff, but we don't know what to do with the stuff. Why? Because you're not allowed to talk about God. God is a dirty word, and religion is a terrible thing. And really, we live in a world of nihilism, a nihilist world where nothing means anything. And this is the biggest problem. People talk about every time there's another shooting, another terrible tragedy, people talk about gun control. I'm not saying gun control isn't a bad idea or a good idea. I'm not weighing in on that. That's not the point. Because there was a time when there wasn't gun control either, and there weren't all these shootings going on. I don't know that there are more guns available today than there ever used to be. And people say, well, when the American founding fathers wrote the Constitution, they meant a musket, not an AR-15. Yeah, but they meant a musket to defend against the muskets of the redcoats. So in theory, one could argue that they meant an AR-15 to defend against a more raiding army. But it's actually not relevant. The point is, all of this is a diversion. It's a red herring. That's not the issue. The issue is not more guns or more security, less security. The issue is what is wrong with people. It used to be when a person went crazy, he harmed himself. Now they're harming other people. And the simple answer, which is not simple at all, is that life has lost its meaning. This is what Rabbi Goldstein was talking about from Poway. That's what he said. He said we need a moment of silence in the schools. This is what the Rebbe was talking about in the early 80s. The Rebbe was talking about a scenario such as today. He talked about a situation where people had no meaning to life. I shouldn't commit a crime because a police officer is going to catch me. That's not why you shouldn't commit a crime. You shouldn't commit a crime because someday you're going to have to stand before God. You have to answer before God because God created you, because you're not an accident. If a person is to view the world only through the lenses of science, why should anything mean anything? A whole bunch of molecules at some point collided and exploded, and some of the stuff ended up being rock, and some ended up being tree, and some ended up being duck, and some ended up being a person. Who cares? None of this has any meaning. It's just a conglomeration of atoms or molecules and protons and neutrons that are lumped together and happen to randomly evolve in a certain way. Why does it mean anything? So people are accustomed to this notion, they've been brainwashed now for the last 50 years, that nothing means anything. That life has no meaning. We don't talk about the meaning of life. We just talk about stuff. And having a lot of stuff. And having all kinds of things. But actually, that's not what people are looking for. So what is Rabbi Elazar saying? Rabbi Elazar puts it into a frame. He says, Misha ene mahana talmidei chachamim. He says, there's a purpose to creation. And Talmud Torah, the study of Torah, is keneged kulam. That equals everything. That means that when a person studies Torah, that they're actually, if you will, they're nurturing and developing a relationship with God. Nothing less than that. You study Torah, it's like going on a date with God. You go out with somebody and talk to them, you get to know them, having a friendship. Friends share things between each other. When you learn Torah, you're getting to know God. It's God's Torah. The more you learn Torah, the better you know God. And since the Torah is Chachmasei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God's wisdom, as the Alter Rebbe says in the 5th chapter of Tanya, when you know something, it becomes a part of you. You cannot separate between the things I know and who I am. Ultimately, the things I know, that informs who I become. It becomes part of me. So, Talmidei Chachamim are people who devote their lives to Torah study. So what should we focus on? We should focus on the study of Torah and those who devote their lives to Torah. So if somebody has wherewithal, affluence, and ability, who should benefit from it? Or what should it be used for? There are resources. What should resources be used for? The answer is for positivity. So somebody who has, says Rabbi Elazar, but Eini Mahana Talmidei Chachamim, he does not allow this whatever wherewithal, whatever he has, to power or to fuel the study of Torah and meaningful living. Eini Reya Simin Bracha. He doesn't see a sign of blessing. What does it mean? He doesn't see a sign of blessing. He has so many blessings. He has millions of dollars in the bank account. Yeah, he could have millions of dollars in the bank account. Is he happy? Is it blessed? Does it feel good? The answer is no. It's empty. It's vacuous. And therefore the person won't see the blessing in it. And he proves this by talking about Talmidei Chachamim. He says, the pasuk says, Ein sarid la'achlei al kein la'yachal taiv. There was no sarid, there was no remnant to eat with him, and therefore he didn't succeed. What does it mean, the remnant? The remnant we see from the cross-reference in the book of Yoel, Ein sarid al Talmidei Chachamim. So since we have this idea of a remnant, and you say there's no remnant with you, and since the remnant is a euphemism for Talmidei Chachamim, the message being conveyed to us is that if we have, that which we have has to be put towards positive use. And positive use, for a member of Am Yisrael, the study of Torah is a major part of that. If not the lion's share part of it, like it says, Talmud Torah keneged kulam.
Rabbi Elazar intimating how you're supposed to get stuck. Like, because to me it's like part and parcel of stucca itself. Right?
No, very interesting that you asked that question. I'm very pleased you asked the question. Actually, because you helped me bring a point out. I don't think this has anything to do with tzedakah. Actually, tzedakah is an obligation. It's an obligation. It's a halachic obligation that a person gives 10% of their earnings to tzedakah. That's an obligation. If a person really wants to find his life elevated, uplifted, you have to give not 10%, but 20%. Like we're talking about the five fingers. If 1/5 is given, it lifts up the whole hand. That's really, ideally, we should aspire to be giving away 1/5 of our earnings for positive causes, for tzedakah. He doesn't say Misheini Nesin tzedakah. A person could give tzedakah. It's okay. I gave my tzedakah. Now leave me alone. I'm done. He says Misheini Mahana. He doesn't use his affluence for Talmidei Chachamim. So I'll give you an example. Hashem blesses you with a beautiful home. When was the last time you had a farbrengen in the home? When was the last time your resources, I don't mean you, I mean, when was the last time resources were put towards benefiting somebody else, benefiting Torah study, benefiting and promulgating what we consider to be positive activity? That's what he means. If you have blessings, if you have wherewithal, if you have abundance, you should be mahana. You should ensure that you're sharing it, you're using it. It's fueling positivity. It's not about giving it away necessarily. Inviting somebody to the table is not tzedakah. A person can't invite guests to his table and then make a calculation how much the food cost and subtract it from his tzedakah. Right? That would be a very strange way of living. When a person has guests over at his table, he's sharing what he has. That's a Jewish way of living. That's what Rabbi Elazar is saying here. At least that's the way I understand it. Because if it was about tzedakah, it would say you have to give tzedakah. Okay, now on to the next subject. As I warned you in the beginning of this class, we're all over the place. So we talked about night activities, which is really a euphemism for recreation, and what we should be using the time when we aren't busy for. We talked about the notion of having stuff, having abundance, having wherewithal, what affluence is about, which really is almost a commentary on what life's about, on what possession is about. If I own things, if I have things, what should I use those things for? And now the Gemara moves on to talk to us about, it's going to be a conversation about leftovers. But as you'll see, really this is a conversation about the kind of house that we should try to live in, as you'll see. Rabbi Elazar now says like this: V'amar Rabbi Elazar, Kol mi she'eni mishayer pasa shulchanei. Anybody who doesn't leave bread on the table, eini rei yasim bracha leilo. He's never going to see any sign of blessing. What does this mean? So Rashi says, Kol mi she'eni mishayer psisin. Anybody who doesn't leave pieces of bread on the table means that tzarech l'shayer, a person has to leave behind. K'dichsiv, like it says in the book of Kings, achoil v'hoiser, eat and leave over. Some of the Mefarshim suggest that if a person eats everything on the table, he indicates that he doesn't have enough. He's eating every morsel. When a person eats, he has to eat, showing that he's satisfied, that he's happy, that he's grateful for God's blessings, and he doesn't take anything for granted. This is a little hard to understand. What does that mean? If I ate everything on the table, I was hungry. That's what there was. Why do I have to leave? Why do I have to leave food in the house? Why should the cupboard never be bare, so to speak? Why should there always be bread on the table? So many of the Mefarshim explain this, that it's not about having bread on the table per se, but rather it's about benefiting a poor person who might walk into the house. You never know who's going to come into the house. Once upon a time, Jewish people used to live in open homes. Today people live in homes with big fences and dogs and bells and whistles and don't come near my house. And everybody's house is his castle in Fort Knox. And maybe there's good reasons for that. We live in a scary world today. But it used to be a Yiddish home, a Hasidish home. It was an open home. People felt comfortable coming in. Poor people in the old days in the shtetl, even in the early days here in North America, people would stop in the house. They would get invited in. People would be able to sit at a table. A home was not a private place. A home was a mini institution. Every home was like a little bit of a soup kitchen once upon a time. There were all kinds of people that would come and they would eat and they would benefit. You had a home, you had food. Somebody else didn't have a home and didn't have food. Come have something to eat. So it was important always to have something in case somebody walked in. It's like when people came to the home, you should always have something to serve. Once upon a time, people didn't have 6 kinds of cake and who knows how many things that are packaged and sitting in a pantry. Once upon a time, food had to be made on a daily basis. There was no refrigeration, and they didn't load our food with so many preservatives that we all glow at night without knowing it. But the food should last for 6 months when it looks fresh, and who knows what's inside your kishkas. Once upon a time, the food didn't really last that long, right? No refrigeration, no preservatives, per se, at least not artificial preservatives. You could pickle stuff with it. That's about it. You could dry, you could cure fruit. So when people had bread, how did they have bread? They baked bread. They went out to the field, they collected wheat, they made flour, they baked bread. So Rabbi Elazar says you should leave some bread over. Why? Because you never know who's coming in. Somebody comes in. Today we can take the bread out of the freezer. Once upon a time we didn't have that ability. So if somebody comes in, I should have what to give them. It should never be such a thing that a Jewish home is inhospitable to the point that if a stranger comes, I have nothing to feed him. So in today's day and age, it's very different. We have pantries today. I don't know if Rabbi Elazar is saying you have to leave the bread on the table. If you leave it on the table, it will just get moldy. There's nothing wrong with having a few bagels in the freezer or having food in the pantry. His point is that there should always be food available in case somebody shows up. If somebody comes to the house, you're a Yiddish home, you can always serve them. And therefore, this is what he means. Now, a pasuk, a verse, can never be misconstrued from its literal meaning. Ein mikra yotze midei pshutei. If it's a verse in the Torah, it always has to mean its literal iteration first and foremost, unless it's Bilam's words, which are preceded by here's a mashal. By Yisa Mishaloi, he began his parable and he talked in riddles and go try to figure out what he's talking about. Fine. So Bilam's words are not literal. But otherwise, in the Torah, when it says something, it's literal. But that's mikra. Ein mikra yotze midei pshutei. The mikra cannot be construed or accurately disconstrued from its literal meaning. Reb Sadi Gaon said the person who does that is apikoros. So he denies the truth and the divinity of Torah. But when we learn the words of Chazal, we learn the words of our sages, we don't have to read the words literally. Sometimes they are literal, and in the Shulchan Aruch, the halacha will be ruled literally, but there is no such ruling in the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't say in the code of Jewish law, thou shalt leave bread on your table. So what is the Gemara saying? Then we have to understand it somewhat euphemistically. Maybe Rabbi Elazar meant this literally in his day, but it was not about leaving the bread on the table. It was about the purpose behind this. What was he gunning for? What was he looking for? What was this about? So the Mefarshim say it was about being able to serve, being able to provide, being able to offer hospitality. And that makes sense. Now we understand it a little bit differently. And that's what Rabbi Elazar meant when he said, and that maybe that's even what Rashi's alluding to when he said, look in the book of Kings. It says, Achol v'hoiser. Eat, yeah, of course, eat, leave some over. You never know who's coming for lunch.
Is that where the minhag comes from, to leave bread prevention on the table?
Possibly. But you'll soon see that there's also a minhag to clean away the crumbs. So the Gemara is going to present Rabbi Elazar with a challenge, as the Gemara sometimes does. Gemara says, really, Rabbi Elazar? Somebody who doesn't leave bread on the table, which as we explained, it means somebody who doesn't provide or make sure there's opportunity for provision for others, is not going to see bracha, will not see blessing forever? And he brings a pasuk, shenemar ein sarid la'achlei, because there's no remnant to eat, al kein le'yachal tev, therefore you won't know of good. Yeah. So it's the same pasuk. Now this verse is elaborated on a little bit differently. Now this verse is coming to mean that a person who doesn't literally leave remnants, literally, for a remnant, for a person who doesn't have. So the Gemara says, how could it be possible that Rabbi Elazar said this? V'ha'amar Rabbi Elazar himself said on another occasion, Kol ha'mishayer psisim al shulchanoi, anybody who leaves bread on his table, it's as if he's worshiping idols. It's a pretty big extreme there. We have a little bit of a contradiction. And it's the same Rebbe, the same teacher. He said, don't leave bread on your table, you get no blessing. Leave bread on your table, you're an idolater. Rabbi, please tell me which one it is. I want to do this, but this is a problem. And where did he get that from? Oh, it's on pasuk. It's also shenemar because it says ha'orchim legad shulchan, those who set a table for God. Now, God was a deity in Canaanite times. It's one of the false idolatrous spirits or shamans or images they used to worship. V'hamemalim lemeni mimasach. Many was another foreign deity or god. And God used to get the food and many got the drink. So people would mix the beverages, and they would bring those sacramental beverages to the many God, and they would give the bread to the God, not to be confused with God. By the way, it's very interesting that the name God, of all the names of the Shvatim, the only name that there is not a single prophet that we know of whose name was God, and there's not a single rabbi from the Talmud whose name is God. In other words, all the names of the Shvatim are all represented. The names of the Shvatim show up throughout Tanakh, and the names of the tribes show up throughout the Gemara also. But the only name that does not found, not in Tanakh and not in the Gemara, is God. And there are those who theorize that's because later on, God, the same Gimel Dalet, became a name of an idol. So people were like leery because of the name of an idol. The truth is, God means luck. Ba God means luck has come, luck has arrived. And luck can easily be misconstrued into being like some kind of foreign god. So at some point, it became my lucky God. It was my lucky day. Instead of fortune shined upon me. So because of that, maybe this is why there's no, God became an unpopular name. But it has since become resuscitated. There are many, I know many gods. Like it's not a strange name today. Okay, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi does,
Thank God.
Thank God, yeah. Thank God, not God. I remember Rabbi Emmanuel Shachat, Zecher Levracha, he came to New York City because his daughter got engaged to Rabbi Benny Zippel, who's a shliach from the Rebbe in Salt Lake City. And he sat down at the table. There was the engagement party, l'chaim. And then after the formalities, Rabbi Shachat sat down to Fabring. And he began by saying, he had like a very heavy accent, "Today is God's birthday." But he meant God, the tribe. He meant today's God's birthday. I'm like, what? He said, "Rabbi, what did you just say?" God ben Yaakov. I said, okay, God ben Yaakov. He meant to say it was a day of Mazel, his daughter got engaged, it was a fortune, God is the kind of person who knew all these arcane little facts when God was born. All right, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says in the top of page Tzadik Beis that a person who leaves bread behind on the table, it's like he's feeding an idol, like worshipping an idol. Rashi says, Shekain Oisin, this was their practice. Shemanichen Shulchan Aruch b'Meichel u'Mishta, L'shem Oisa Avodah Zarah Shekorin God. They would set a table for this idol who was called God. Umimalim koises, they would fill up glasses, shel merkachim, of different kind of spiced, I don't know if it means spiced wines or different mixtures. Nesuchim l'Avodah Zarah, which were brought as libations for idolatry. And that idol, Sheshma Meni, that idol was called Meni. So we had a Meni and a God. And Meni and God was these different idolatrous deities. And because it would seem that a person is bringing an offer to God or Meni, not Meni, but Meni really. So if it's God or Meni, so therefore Rabbi Elazar said, don't leave bread on the table. Because somebody might say, oh, look at this guy. He worships God. I mean, God. Not God. He doesn't worship God. He doesn't worship God. He worships God. It wouldn't look right. So you have to be careful to make sure nobody misunderstands what you're doing or interprets it as being an act of homage to idols. But this is a problem because the same Rebbe Lezer said two things which very much seem to be a contradiction.
How about drinks?
How about drinks?
If one leaves pieces of bread.
So Rebbe Lezer never said to leave drinks behind. Why? It's not very hard to get a glass of water. It was Marie Antoinette who said, there's no bread and water, they should eat cake and wine. Drink you can always get. You don't need to leave. Today's day and age, there's a tap. You can always find water. But bread, that's another story.
There's a problem leaving bread over because it's like worshiping God.
It looks like it. Rebbe Lezer said, don't leave bread behind because it looks like you're imitating the practice of idolatrous worship.
But why didn't he say, and don't leave drink?
Well, he never said you should leave drink behind. And I guess, you see, the drink wasn't just ordinary drink. It was like mixed in a certain way, and it was like, ordinarily leaving over a half-drunk can of Coca-Cola was not going to look like you're bringing a libation to Meni. If you were mixing drinks and it had an official sacramental, whatever, that's when it might look like it. But leaving bread on the table might look like you're setting a table. What are you setting a table for? So when you have guests coming, a meal's about to be, we're set the table. We're leaving the table, and now you're setting a table. Who are you setting a table for? I know. You're doing it for God, huh? That's what's going on over here. You really worship this idol. So it doesn't look right. The Rebbe says, don't do it. So the Gemara seems to indicate we have that a major contradiction between Rav Elazar and Rabbi Elazar. On one hand, telling us to leave bread behind. On the other hand, telling us never leave bread behind on the table. So the Gemara says, Loi kasha. There's no question here. Why? Because there are different circumstances. Ha'de'ika shlema bahadei, ha'deleka shlema bahadei. This is talking about an instance where there's already a loaf of bread on the table, and the other is talking about an instance where there is no other loaf of bread on the table. So when should you leave sliced bread on the table? If there's no loaf on the table. Remember, once upon a time, they didn't have sliced bread. They just had bread. If you sliced the bread, then you had sliced bread. But it didn't come from the bakery sliced. Before sliced bread was invented, you actually had to slice the bread by yourself, like we do on Shabbat. So the question is, when can you leave slices of bread at the table? Well, that depends if there's a loaf of bread on the table. Let's take a look in Rashi. Rashi says, the Ika Shlema Bahadei. Yad Dharma has a different way of learning this Gemara. We're going to learn Rashi's way. Rashi says, Shemevi Shlema La'acha Sha'achal. You finished eating, and then you bring a full loaf of bread to the table. So he said, that's strange. V'noisen ala shulchan in hapsisim. You left some pieces of bread on the table. So if there's bread on the table, there's bread in the bread basket, proverbially speaking. If somebody comes to the house, what will they eat? Why there's bread on the table? So if there was bread on the table, why'd you bring another loaf out? So when you brought a loaf out, when there was already pieces of bread on the table, so then the mechazeh, that seems the l'shem avodah zarah avodah hachi. That seems as if you're doing it for an idolatrous purpose. But in the other cases, the leka shlema bahadayu. There is no whole bread. The mizumanim la'ani, which is prepared for the poor. So ha'gada lebeisi legarsinan. Okay, the next piece we don't have to. In some of the versions of the Gemara, there were some other words that are no longer, we know now are not relevant. And so the point is this then. If it's clear that the bread is being left behind in the event that somebody were to come and eat something, then that's an act of hospitality. That shows you have an open home. But if it's not clear that that's the purpose because there's already bread on the table, and then you're bringing the loaves and putting them on the table, so you're setting the table after the meal, that's weird. What are you trying to accomplish? It's not like you know there's guests coming. You're not setting the table for anybody. The meal's done. Everybody's left the table. Why bring out a loaf of bread now? That seems like you're worshiping an idol. And actually, it makes perfect sense that Rabbi Elazar would say both teachings. If Rabbi Elazar would never say leave bread on the table, he would never say leave bread on the table. It's not an issue. But here he said leave bread on the table. So Rabbi Elazar has to qualify. He says leave bread on the table, but it should be clear that the bread that's being left on the table is for the purpose of hospitality. But don't leave bread on the table, which would make it appear as if we're in any way engaged in something which is of idolatrous nature or idol worship. And there's two really very important teachings which I think we can glean from this Gemara. And it should be said that the Gemara does not speak to us only in its literal iteration. Rabbi Elazar may have said that in a literal way at the time, but it speaks to us in a non-literal iteration in a very meaningful way. Number one, there always should be something for the poor, for somebody who shows up in the house. A Yiddish home can't be empty. You can't only have food for yourself in your house. If you have the good privilege of having a roof over your head, and you have a kitchen, and you have a refrigerator, there should always be food. What if a guest shows up? There should always be food. You should always be able to feed somebody if somebody comes into the house. You never know. I once walked into shul here, and I saw some yeshiva students. One of them was related to me. I said, what are you guys doing here? I said, oh, it's the summer, and the camp went to Canada's Wonderland, but we're not interested. I'm like, I have to feed these guys. He said, "Do you have any lunch today?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay." Went to the house. We'll figure out. I said, "Worst off, I make you eggs. I'll figure something out, right?" My Mazel, it was Sunday. There was plenty left over from Shabbos. There was plenty of bread and lots of other things. But that's a perfect example of you have to always have food in the house. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who's going to show up. And that's the first thing Rabbi Eliezer is telling us what kind of house to have. This is not tzedakah. This defines the character of a Jewish home. A Jewish home is a place where hospitality is not foreign. Then, Rabbi Eliezer is telling us something else. We have to be very careful about behavior we engage in that should not be interpreted by somebody who is unsuspecting or unknowledgeable as if we are doing something which is alien to Judaism. Even if a person, I didn't mean to do anything. We need to be concerned with how things would be interpreted by others. You cannot simply absolve yourself, wash your hands and say, it's not my problem. If they chose to interpret what I did in a negative way, that's their problem. If people are looking at you, then you have to be mindful of how it may be viewed. And this is what we call the idea of marit ayin. Things don't look right. We should ostensibly endeavor to project in a holy way, in a good way, in a positive way. Because if you do something negative, or you're not careful and it comes across as if you're doing something negative, other people may decide to do exactly the same. We all do that. We justify things. If so-and-so did it, I could do it also. It's a common way that people function or justify for themselves. And therefore we have to be very careful about that. So Rabbi Eliezer says if it's possible that somebody might come along and look at the way you're putting bread on the table and think that this means idolatry, well, then make sure you don't do it. Okay, now we move on to the next subject. Now we're going to talk about deception. V'omar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said, Kol ha-machlif b'diburei. The word machlif literally means to exchange. Like we have a Gemara that says, ha-machlif para b'chamar. Somebody says, you have a cow, I have a donkey. I have too many cows, you have too many donkeys. Let's make an exchange. You take the cow, I take the donkey. Of course, the Gemara now is going to give us a case where the cow gave birth to a calf. Now the question is, whose calf is it? When did the exchange happen? But that's not what I'm talking about now. I'm just going to give you, appreciate the verbiage, ha-machlif. Ha-machlif means, I said one thing, but actually, I'm going to change that for something else. So this could be in business. This could be promises people make to each other. This could be guarantees. This could be assurances. Machlif b'diburei. Yeah, I said one thing, but I didn't exactly mean it. So I did say it. Somebody once made a pledge to me. And I said with him, I said, you made the pledge? Nah, I said, I didn't mamish mean it. I gave money to Eretz Israel instead. I said, no, what are you talking about? You said, yeah, I said, it doesn't matter. I said, okay. It doesn't matter, okay. Which I told the guy, okay, yes, it does matter. You can't be machlef b'dibura. You said one thing. You said something. You have to do what you say. He said it at his father's shiva house, no less. Really? Like, it's ridiculous. But the notion of being machlef b'dibura, people rationalize things. I said this thing, I didn't exactly mean it, whatever. You don't have to stick to the letter of the law. I have to do everything exactly as I say I'm going to do it. More or less, The Gemara says no. Rabbi Eliezer says you should know that hamachlef b'diburei, that somebody who doesn't honor their words and doesn't stick to their word, that this person is putting himself in a really bad situation. Do you know what it's metaphorized as? It's ki'ilu eved avodah zarah. It's as if you worship an idol. Wow, that's like heavy stuff. Worship an idol is denial of God. And here's just a person who was deceptive, dishonest, didn't exactly present his words as he meant. Why is that the case? So first of all, Rabbi Eliezer is going to bring you a pasuk. He didn't just make this up. He didn't take it out of nowhere. Rabbi Eliezer says, Ksiv hacha. It says here, and this is an instance of one of the holiest people ever to walk the face of the earth, who is being cajoled by another extremely holy person to be deceptive. And I speak here about Yaakov Aveeno, who is being cajoled by mother Rivka. And she says, you need to go in there and get those blessings. They're your blessings. Esau is unlawfully going to take those blessings, you need to slip in before. Your father doesn't know. He doesn't get it. You need to do what you need to do. Yaakov, go and do this. And Yaakov says to his mother, well, I can't do that. What if he figures this out? What if Isaac figures out what's going on here? V'yisi be'enav, I will be in his eyes, kimitatea, as a person who is deceptive. Now, what are you going to say? What do you mean you'll be in his eyes? You are deceptive, for heaven's sake. No, not really. Yaakov wasn't really deceptive. The truth is those blessings were Yaakov's. The truth is that Esav sold him for a bowl of lentils many, many years earlier. That is the truth. But Yaakov didn't want his father to know this. He wouldn't give his father pain. It wouldn't give him heartache. The truth is that if Yitzchak had known that Esau was a murderer and a rapist, he would not have ever considered giving him the blessings. But he didn't know this. And Hashem kept it from him. And when he showed up at home, Esau came like a very holy person. He came with a big streimel and a big bekesha, and he's, Dad, can I do anything for you? He's a good boy. Yitzchak said, he's a good boy. He's a little wild. He's a little on the wild side, but he's a good boy. He asks questions like, how do I take meiser from salt? Who asks a question like that? He's such a good guy. He means well. Whatever. He married the wrong lady and he's a little confused. He means well. He's a good boy. I just have to get through to him. Then he's going to be a good boy. He's a good boy. Yitzchak. And Rivka's like, he's not a good boy. He's a monster. This guy is all trouble. But nobody had heart to tell Yitzchak. And Yitzchak is convinced he was a good boy. So now he wants to give the blessings. And Rivka says, this is the 0 hour. You have to act now. You have to do what's rightfully yours. And Yaakov says, he's not going to understand. My father won't know. He doesn't know the history over here. He's going to come in there. I'm going to come in there with goat skins. He's going to take one feel on me. He says, this guy's an imposter. And then I'm going to be in real trouble. So the word that's used is kimitatea. That's the word used, kimitatea. So what? So v'ksiv hasam, and there's another pasuk. And this pasuk is speaking very clearly about idolatry. And the pasuk says, in Yirmiyahu, in the 10th chapter, it says, Hevel Hema maset tatuim. Yirmiyahu is railing against people who have worshipped idols and expect their shamans and their spirits and their idols to come and save them. And he says, Hevel Hema. It's a waste of time. It's air. It's nothing. It's worthless. Maset tatuim. It's a deception. It's a deception. You think it's real, you think it's powerful, it's nothing. This is the people who create isms in the Western world, and they worship those isms, and they fight for those isms, and in the end there's nothing left of the ism. How many Jews tragically in the turn of the last centuries were communists? And how many of them relentlessly persecuted Torah Jews and Torah leaders in the name of communism? They were going to save the world with communism. Now, Baruch Hashem, is 100 years later, and the same people are making the same mistakes all over again, unfortunately, because history seems to repeat itself, and nobody learns the lessons. But then that was the ism. People worship this. They were ready to die for it. They did die for it. What happened in the end was hollow. It was nothing. Communism collapsed. There's nothing left. I think Cuba's last place is still holds sway. There's nothing left. It was an empty shell. But it took 70, 80 years until it became obvious that it was empty. Yirmiyahu said to the people, you're worshiping idols, you think it's a joke. In the end, it's worthless. It's nothing. It's a facade. It's an empty suit. There'll be nothing left of it. And he uses the words tatuim. So Rabbi Elazar says, you need to understand, he says, my friend, if the Torah, the scripture, prophecy, chose to use the word tatuim when it discusses the emptiness of idols, and when it uses the word tatuim when Yaakov said, lest I be perceived as an imposter, as somebody who is deceptively presenting himself, which on some level he actually was, but he really wasn't deceptive. He really was doing what was rightfully his in order to protect Yitzchak from the pain of what the pain he would have to find out who Esav is. He didn't want to tell him all the slander. But the bottom line was, when Yaakov was afraid of being discovered as such, he uses the word tatua. So this can't be an accident, Rabbi Elazar said. It can't be an accident that Torah happens to use this word only twice. In the whole scripture, it's only used twice. It's only used twice, with Yaakov's seeming deception and with Yirmiyahu railing against idols. And therefore, there's a link between the two. So the Gemara says, the link between the two is that a person who behaves in a deceptive fashion is like the worshipping of an idol. Of course, the question is, all right, I understand the pasuk, but why is it actually like that? First of all, Marsha says, the pasuk says, "Hayisi be'einav kimitateya." I'll be like a deceptive person. Okay, so the whole thing is what we call chaf hadimyan. It's not actually. Serving idols is actual deception. Changing your words it's like worshiping an idol. Why is it like worshiping an idol? What really is the corollary of the two? You shouldn't lie, you shouldn't be deceptive, you should do what you say and say what you do. But why does it become idolatry? So Rashi says, what does it mean, hamachlef b'diburei? Mishane b'diburei. He makes these imperceptible little changes. He doesn't outright say, I'm not doing such and such. He says, I'm doing it a little like this, a little like that. Yeah? He makes little changes. It shouldn't be even noticed that he actually lied. So the person actually thinks he's telling the truth. This is the worst kind of lie. The lie in which you justify it. Very rare is the person who gets up and says, I'm doing the wrong thing now. I'm being really bad and sinful. And say, if you were me, you would do twice as bad. It's not even such a big sin. I could justify it. I didn't lie. I just modified my words a little. I twisted a little bit. I made it look a little different. Now the interesting thing here is that the Mefarshim once again do not give us much to go on. They don't really explain why this is like idolatry. So I'm stuck trying to explain this to you. Here's what I think. I think this is in some way connected to the concept of false weights and measures. That we have this idea that Rambam says, somebody who uses false weights and measures, it's as if he denies God having taken us out of Egypt. Right? Of all the mitzvahs, this mitzvah says use false weights and measures as if you deny that God took us out of Egypt. So why is this? Because the person who uses a false weight and measure, he's selling you a pound of rice, but the weight that's supposedly a pound is not actually a pound. It looks like a pound. He's actually selling you 9/10 of a pound. But he put in the scale, looks like a pound, and so he took an extra nickel from this one, a whole day is making extra nickels. This is like these credit card companies, they're charging you 0.5 cent extra. Nothing very much. From 1 million people a day, 0.5 cent extra. Not a bad heist, $500,000 a day. 0.5 cent. Who will notice 0.5 cent? Nobody. Who will notice 1 penny? Overcharge everybody just 1 penny. You have to have enough accounts, and then it becomes worth it. A few $100,000 every single time. So when a person is stealing, he's stealing. That's outright brazen theft. But when a person is using an imperceptible change in the weights, so it's as if he says, God doesn't know the difference. Nobody knows the difference. It doesn't matter. But the whole idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt, is that God says to us, not only did I create the world, I'm engaged. I'm involved in the world. Everything that happens under God's tutelage, if you will. Hashem is always involved in this world. Like the Sefer HaKuzari asked the question, he says that the king who was interested in learning about Judaism asked the Chacham, he says, so what do you guys believe in? And he says, God spoke to us, he introduced himself to us, he said, I'm the God who took you out of Egypt. And the Kazakh, Kagan Bek, or Kazakh king, purportedly said to the Chacham, you got to be kidding, he said. Why wouldn't God say, I am the God who created heaven and earth? And you know what his answer is? His answer is to believe that God created heaven and earth is not an act of loyalty to God. So God created heaven and earth, and now he's gone to the Caribbean. He'll be back in 1,000 years. God doesn't care about what's going on. Yes, he created heaven and earth. Intelligent design. It's not an accident that happened in a choreographed way, but God has better things to do. My God is bigger than little minutia, little silly things. My God doesn't give out silly little things. I believe in a bigger God. What do you think? I don't believe in a big God? Because I worry about little details? We need the details, not God needs the details. God gives us an opportunity to forge a relationship with him through little mitzvahs. And he makes these little things very significant and very important. So when God took us out of Egypt, he demonstrated that he's not the God that created heaven and earth once upon a time. It's not a fairy tale God, a once upon a time God. It's a here and a now God. It's God who's involved in every single moment. God who brings all of reality into existence. So when a person thinks that he can use false weights and get away with it, what's he essentially saying? God doesn't have a difference. Well, what difference does it make? It doesn't matter. as long as you stick to the big stuff, God doesn't sweat the details. Let's not get involved in the little nitty-gritty. The devil's in the details. As long as you have weights and measures, a little extra here, a little extra there, that's the biggest denial of God's presence. A person who uses false weights and measures, that says the Rebbe. In explaining this Rambam, the Rebbe says that's why he's denying Yetzias Mitzrayim. If he wouldn't use false weights and measures, he's just a thief. He's a thief. Okay, fine, he's a thief. But here you use the system to beat it. It says you're making as if, you give the impression as if you're honest. You're using the weights and measures in a dishonest way. I think maybe this is the pshat of Mishana B'Dibure. It's not a person who came along and lied to you. I said I'm going to do A, and I'm not doing A. I just changed it a little bit. I said I would do precisely such. I did it a little kind of. I have to do everything exactly as I said. Small little things. Rashi says, Mishana B'Dibure, you're talking about a person who makes a small imperceptible change. Shelo yehi nikar. Nobody will even notice that he subtracted a little something. Like a legal document. He made a little change. But he moved the period, he put add a little comma, a small little change. So it's those little things where you think nobody's noticing. That's the idolatry. That's Kilo Eved Avodah Zarah. That means that you don't believe that God's in control. And therefore, we have to stick to the details. Person made a commitment, our words are meaningful, our words are important, and our words have to be honored, and we have to treat them with the greatest of reverence. And it's interesting to point out that Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year, begins with what? With Kol Nidre. What's Kol Nidre? A discussion about vows, which gives us an appreciation of how serious are the words that we use and the promises and the commitments that we make. Okay, the last piece of Gemara. If you thought everything was weird till now, wait till you hear what's coming now.
Wait, just go back to Rashi.
Huh?
Is there another way to understand Rashi that you change your voice?
Is there a way to understand Rashi to change your voice?
Person changes his speech so that he doesn't sound like himself.
I mean, I suppose you could, but then how would that be an Eved Avodah Zarah? If you want to learn it that way, I'll give you a way to learn it. If you want to learn it the decibel, right? So there was a story that in the shtetl, that there's a fellow named Yankel. He's a very cantankerous, argumentative fellow, and he decided Moshe is a ganef. And he went around accusing Moshe of being a ganef. And the word came, and Moshe came, Rabbi, Yankel accused me of being a ganef. And the rabbi called Yankel and says, Yankel, did you accuse Moshe of being a ganef? He says, well, of course I did. You have proof of such a thing? He said, what proof, Rabbi? The whole everybody knows Moshe is a ganef. It's common knowledge. I didn't tell anybody anything anybody knows. The rabbi said, I'm sorry. This is Meitzah Shemra, your slander and gossip. You must make up for this. What do you want me to do? He says, before my sermon next Shabbos, you get up on the bima and you're going to announce that Moshe is not a ganef. Okay, fine. The rabbi says you have to listen. So he gets up on the bima and he has this written out exactly what he has to say. Moshe is nicht a ganef. Moshe is not a ganef. So they get quiet. Everybody's ready to listen to us. The rabbi says, Yankel has a little announcement to make before my sermon today. Okay, and he says, Moshe is not a ganef. And with this he sits down. So, sometimes there's a slight perceptibility. Move the decibel one way or the other, right? I don't know. Anyway, if it's simply changing the voice, I'm not sure how to.
It fits into the Yaakov.
Yeah, it fits into the Yaakov narrative. Yeah. But that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't that Yitzchak's going to see I'm changing my voice. The issue is I'm misrepresenting. It's a deception. That's the ultimate issue. All right, so the last piece of Gemara is going to talk about pornography or so. And Rebbe Lezer, having spoken of the importance of our speech, now speaks about the importance of sight and looking where one shouldn't. Va'amar Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer said, Kola mistakel be'erva. Anybody who looks at nakedness, which is generally understood to mean the private parts. And Rashi seems very clear, private parts of a woman, he says. Kashta nineres. So this literally translates as his bow is emptied, but it seems to indicate impotence. Shenemar, because it says, and here we have a pasuk. This pasuk has nothing to do with anybody's organ. In fact, it has nothing to do even with a bow. it's a pasuk in Habakkuk that's speaking about the concept of God's bow being emptied. It's a whole thing is euphemistic, but nonetheless, Rabbi Elazar read into this, and he says because we have the pasuk that says "Erya ta'or kashtecha," so the pasuk would mean then that the keshes, which is a euphemism for the literally that it says that semen is ejected like from a bow, and that euphemism is used elsewhere in Torah parlance. So therefore, a person who engages in pornographic viewings will end up being impotent. You take a look in Rashi. Rashi says, "Kashten in eres koyach koishi ever shalei." The ability, you'll pardon me, for I guess to achieve an erection, that's literally the meaning of koishi, will get lost. Ninar is it empties. She'eni moiled. I don't know. I guess you have prostate problems. Shenemre area ter kashtecha, area sha'ata mistakel ba, the nakedness that you look at. So this has an impact be'ervasa in her nakedness. He ter kashtecha, that will empty your corresponding organ. Rashi says that this may have another meaning to it. Hamistakel means hamechashev ba'aroyes de'eshes, somebody who's thinking of other nakedness. He says not even looking, but somebody who is thinking pornographically. Kashta geveres yodin in eres mishalechas misma'etes, then it means his powers or abilities are weakened and they wane. As the Gemara says, that if somebody finds a sack and he has to return it to the owner, so it says you have to shake it out or empty it once every 30 days in order to keep something. So it says the word of ninar means to empty or shake something. So he says therefore he will be, so to speak, shaken of his strength. Anyway, I don't know if there's any scientific proof of this, but if Rabbi Elazar said it, it should be good enough for us. And now finally, Rabbi Elazar, his last lesson before we return to resurrection is stay out of the limelight. Va'omar Rabbi Elazar said, La'olam havikobel v'kayam. Forever, the way to go is be kobel. So kobel is a euphemism for be humble, or stay out of the headlights. Stay out of the headlines, and then kayam. Then you stick around. Omar Reb Zera, afanana metanina. This actually I heard elsewhere too, and I heard a proof for this. What's the proof of this? This is the uniqueness of Torah. We go from one extreme to the other. So he says there's a halacha with something called tsaras. Tsaras is a paranormal condition that can afflict a person's skin. It can afflict a person's hair. It can afflict a person's garments, the Chesterfield, or even the walls of your home. And they're not always the same appearance, and they're not always the same color. It could be something like whitening of the skin in an unnatural way. It could be falling out of the hair, baldness, according to the Rambam, without anything else, and the growth of a strange-looking hair. It could be what looks like a mildew, but it's only for appearance's sake, that shows up in white garments that are made of linen or wool, or it could be on a leather Chesterfield. Or finally, it could actually be on the walls of a stone building in Eretz Yisrael. Now, in any of these cases, any kind of tsaras, it has to be examined by a Kohen or by a professional. And if the Kohen is not knowledgeable, the professional has to tell the Kohen what to say. But then after it gets examined, the Kohen has to say, Tameh or Tahar? This is cool or this is not cool? So in a home, it says they tell them, take everything out of the house. Because once it's in the house, once it's declared to be Tameh, ritually impure, everything in the house becomes Tameh. And then it's a huge pain in the neck to put everything in the mikveh, and some things can't even be purified. So therefore we tell the guy, take everything out of the house. Take everything out of the house. I once saw written that it says that one of the reasons that tsaras comes ala botin, tsaras comes in the home, is because of tsarasayim, because of a person who's not generous with others. And most people are generous to say, could you please help me? Can you give? People say, I don't have anything. All of a sudden, they make him take everything out of his house. Everybody says, all his treasures are coming out. All right, taking everything out of the house. And then the Kohen has to go and take a look. So the halach is like this. Bayit ofel, if it's a dark home, ein poischen lechalonis. You don't come in with big flashlights. You don't even open the windows. You leave it in its natural state. You don't have to bring artificial light. Whatever is its natural state, that's it. You don't look twice. That's good enough. So he says, We don't bring in additional sources of light, lirois nigoy, to see the lesion. If it's not visible, it's not visible. Shema mina, the Gemara finishes off with a simple, from here, this is where we can hear Rabbi Elazar's teaching from. What does this mean? It means Rabbi Elazar is saying that a person who causes unnecessary attention to themselves actually is like, you're asking for trouble. Because if you bring the limelight on yourself, then things look different in the limelight than they look in the normal light. So people think that they want fame. Everybody thinks they want fame and fortune today. They need to get so many and so many likes on Facebook. They want to be a celebrity. They want to be known. Everybody's driven by this desire to be known and be famous. But actually, Rabbi Elazar said it's not such a good thing. It's a very interesting, one of the Mefarshim connect this to a different Gemara that says that Yosef lived the least of all his brothers. What was the difference in Yosef and his brothers? They led relatively anonymous lives, and he led a very public life. So living, a public life is not necessarily a good thing. It's not good for longevity. If you want longevity, a quiet life, a discreet life is better than a public life. And looking for fame, you're not necessarily doing yourself a favor. You may actually be shaving years off your life. There's a famous story with Rabbi Yosef, and he didn't want to be at Rosh Hashiva, and his friend became the Rosh Hashiva, and he said, because of that, that's why I lived extra years. Even a position of Torah, a position of great importance, and yet, it subtracted years. So fame isn't everything it's cut out to be. And Rabbi Elazar says, if you could stay under the limelight, avoid the limelight. Who needs it? And this has something to do with ayin hara also, of people who want to look, and people who can't fargin, they can't stand to see somebody else be successful, and they could even, like bring a negative energy, or bring about a person gets judged by Hashem. So, as a rule, you don't have to sing about it, you don't have to tell everybody about it. It's not everything has to be shouted from the rooftops, not everything has to be advertised, and people should try to live private lives rather than garish in a limelight life. It's interesting that when Bilam looked at the Jewish people, what was he impressed by? He said, Matovo Alecha Yaakov. He said the doors didn't face each other. He said they lived privacy. Once upon a time, we didn't need privacy laws. People understood that you respect each other's privacy, and people didn't stick things into other people's faces. They didn't advertise everything, flaunt their wealth or flaunt their success. They kept it quiet. It's nobody's business. You do what you do. You have what success you have. You do good things, and it's not relevant for the whole world to know about every time something positive was achieved or accomplished. Of course, this flies in the face of another principle where the Rashba once wrote a response. There was somebody who they wanted him to publicize tzedakah that he was giving, and he said, no, I don't want to publicize. I'll give the tzedakah, but quiet. Nobody's allowed to know. They said, if nobody knows, nobody else is going to participate. We need to publicize what you did. So the man said, no, I refuse. So they wrote a letter to the Rashba, Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Avram ben Aderet, great Sephardic sage. And he answered back, mitzvah lefarsem osei mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to publicize the one who does a mitzvah. So really the question becomes, what's the publicity about? Is the publicity self-serving? If it's self-serving, ultimately it's self-detracting. If the publicity is about engaging in and inspiring others, then it's a good thing. Because another mitzvah, more Torah learned, ultimately benefits all of us. And with this, we finished Rabbi Elazar's assorted teachings, and now the Gemara will return to the original subject, the concept of the ultimate resurrection. Nathan, I'm sorry I kept you so